He's in his 70s. This doesn't work. Okay, so like he's going, yeah, right, okay, sure. A huge amount of faith. But this is an example for us. You know, some of us who are Christians sit there and say, oh yeah, I believe, I'll do whatever, is necessary. My faith is strong, da 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 da. How far would you go in your own faith? Where would you go and what would you do to really show that your faith is strong? And we're not trying to prove anything. If anything, our faith makes our life better in that we can relax and just rest knowing, and that's the key word, knowing that God has got our backs. When we become Christians, we're supposed to give our lives to God. But do we? A lot of times we give our lives to God, and 2 seconds later we take it right back. Okay, we're very forgetful. So things like this are a very important story. So let's take a look at part 2 of this. Here we go. This is the part that a lot of you probably are familiar with Abraham. First of all, pick up your family. Second, go where you don't know where you're going. Thirdly, you're going to have a child. This one is really an amazing example of faith. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to Abraham, Abraham, here I am, he replied. But watch this. Then God said, take your son, your only son. This is a Middle Eastern culture. The son and the first son is hugely important. Everything will be inherited down through the first son. Take your son, your only son. This is incredibly important that this is what's happening. Whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Take a look at this. This is not a lot. Take your son, your only son, take him off and sacrifice him. I say, what? Now the thing that's interesting about this is you'll notice, look down here, early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. There's nothing there about Abraham didn't sleep all night. Abraham tossed and turned. 2 weeks later, he finally decided to do this. God spoke, Abraham obeyed. Without any doubt, without any question. Now, I want to be very clear about something here too, because sometimes churches can get really heavy on people and they start to put on all kinds of unrealistic expectations. Could we be as perfect and obedient as Abraham? We would all like to think, yes, we would. But let's face it, Abraham is a very special character in the Bible. After all, everything is descended down from Abraham. So when we don't match up to what Abraham or Jesus does, there's no need for us to really beat ourselves about falling short, because the bar is held really high. But that is still no reason why we should not try to reach to that bar. Okay? So, we've got to be careful that we don't beat ourselves up. Because then we end up with guilt. Guilt causes problems. The enemy gets involved. Guilt is one of his greatest techniques of getting into your life. So don't go there. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you. took 3 days to get there. And you know what's on his mind. He knows where he's going. Plenty of time to turn around and go back. But he continues on this journey, a physical journey and a journey of faith. When we talk about journey, it's often a physical journey, but it's also sometimes a journey of faith, what we believe in. Okay, now we're starting to get down to the real nitty-gritty here of this story. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. Put yourself in Abraham's place. Your one and only son, and here you go. You've got a torch and a knife, and you know what you're supposed to do with it. As the two of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Again, put yourself in this situation. You have to turn around and tell your son, you are the sacrifice. He knows what it is. Now again, too, I want you to start noticing things, and this is what I'm hoping you'll start to do when you start reading the Bible. Some of these things will start to repeat themselves and will start to come back up again. And one of the key things is this right here. But where is the lamb? Why a lamb? Why a lamb? Why is a lamb important? Why not a goat? Why not a piglet? Well, in fact, piglets aren't kosher. Lamb was used to celebrate the Passover, which is coming. That's still coming. But why, as Christians, does lamb all of a sudden have bells go ding, 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 ding? The lamb, whenever we see lambs, it's going to be a reference to Jesus. That's why this series is called Creation to Christ. Even though we're in the Old Testament, Jesus is there all through the Old Testament. The lamb and the sacrifice are coming up, okay, for when we get to Easter. Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them went on together. Where's this lamb coming from? The little boy is sitting at the top of the mountain. He's looking around. He sees a pile of wood. He sees a fire. He doesn't see any lamb. So you got to wonder, he's starting to question things. But there is going to be a lamb sacrificed. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. Okay, we're like this. We're like a couple seconds away from having this knife plunged into the boy. Okay, this is a huge test. Then he reached out, okay, but the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham, here I am," he replied. So an angel speaks to him at the last minute. Now, we have the altar that Abraham was going to lay Isaac on. And this is the next part of the story here, because God, we can believe in what God's going to tell us. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that your fear of God, you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham was willing to give his son, his only son. But what does this also refer to?
Jesus.
God's going to give his son, his only son. God doesn't ask us to do things that he wouldn't do. He's not going to make us suffer unintentionally. So again, sometimes in our lives we sit there and go, why me? Why me? Why am I suffering? Why do I have to have this happen to me? My answer always is, why not? Who makes you so special? You want to trade places with Jesus and what he did for you? You want to take the whippings, the beatings, to having your back ripped wide open and then stuck on a cross for 3 hours and die a crucifixion? Maybe your ingrown toenail or whatever you're complaining about really isn't that bad. Even if you've got cancer, nobody wants that, but nobody is guaranteed a perfect life. Nobody. Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. Now notice here, he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son, which is the same as who? Jesus. Jesus sacrificed himself for us. In our place, he sacrificed himself. So this whole story of Abraham and Isaac really speaks into your life. You haven't seen anything yet. So Abraham called the place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of your enemies, and through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me. One act of faith gives birth to nations of thousands upon millions. And one of those descendants is in fact Jesus. One act of faith, and look what it's done. So we never know what these acts of faith are going to do. Sometimes we don't see them immediately. Sometimes we see it further down the road. But we know that God has put everything in action. He's putting everything in place for a reason. You know, we always wonder, like, why did this person come into my life? Like, you know, Roger's talked to you about this before, where, you know, Roger, Nancy, my wife, myself, for a while, we were really just, you know, like really tight, like, you know, like this. And then for certain, you know, when they moved up to New Hamburg, we sort of drifted apart. That might have been the end of it. But then we came back together. And God does this all the time for different reasons. And it's just like our faith journey. You start down a road, but the road is never straight. It's twisty, turny, it's got potholes in it. Sometimes when you're walking along half asleep, you'll fall in a pothole. He does that intentionally. There are roads that come in with new people that you meet. You learn from them. Hopefully they learn from you. Sometimes they wander off, never to be seen again. Sometimes they come back in. All God's purpose to make us different. If I had never met my wife, I don't know if I would have ever become a Christian. The turns and twists that amaze us, but don't amaze him, because he's got it all planned out. Then Abraham returned to his servants, and they set off together for Beersheba, and Abraham stayed in Beersheba. Now, I'm not going to read all this. I'm going to leave this up as part of the discussion too. I found this when I was researching this, and this just sort of blew my mind. And anybody wants copies of these slides, just let me know and I'll get you copies of these. What we've got here is a comparison between Jesus and Isaac. And it's really kind of cool when you look at some of the stuff that's up here. When you take a look at these, the father leads his son to be sacrificed. God and Abraham. Look down here. The son was bound to the wood/cross. The son was laid upon the wood/cross. The sacrifice was a substitute. Ram a substitute for Isaac, Jesus a substitute for us. The sacrifice was a demonstration of love for God. This is amazing. The story's not that long in the Bible. We just read it. But it is so packed, full of symbolism, and how Jesus is everywhere. He's everywhere in the Bible, just like he's everywhere in our life. You know, sometimes you have people like, well, I can get away with doing such and such. There's nobody around to see me. Well, guess what? There is somebody there to see you all the time. Just like, and that's a bad thing. But the other thing too is that, we talked about this last time, you realize that when they talk to people about poverty, one of the things that comes up is that people are lonely, which is strange. We live in a city of millions of people. How could you possibly be lonely in a city that has millions of people? Well, it's very simple. There's many people right in this room right here don't have family here in Toronto. Or they've got family. I've talked to some of our people. They've got family that won't even talk to them anymore. We had a guy here who died a little while ago. Nobody came to his funeral. Yet he had family. Didn't have anything to do with them. So it comes up to a time of the year like we've got right now, Christmas, when everybody's running around, oh, Merry Christmas, love and happiness and joy and everything else. We've got people living in their apartments by themselves, physically by themselves, emotionally by themselves, and spiritually by themselves. You don't have to do that. This is your family. This is why next week we are having a Christmas dinner. Okay? And we respect you and love you. And we're going to give you a full Christmas dinner. Not some kind of pre-chewed turkey, but, you know, cooked turkeys from the oven, mashed potatoes, stuffing, everything. Just like you would have at a real sit-down turkey dinner. That's why we're having the Christmas Carol celebration on the 19th. We are family. We hurt together. We laugh together. We are in joy together. You do not have to be alone. You've got us, and even when we're not there, you always, 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 and Jesus promised this, He will always be there. He will never leave you alone. Amen.
Amen.
So, next week, we will carry on with the story, creation to Christ, and here are your topics for this week. Why did God... I've heard a lot of people who are not believers or even seekers say, that God, He is mean. Whoa, how could He give a test like that? So one of the questions I want you to look at is, why did God test Abraham in such a drastic way? 2, how can we use this story to improve our own faith journey? And lastly, how would you do if you were similarly tested? And it doesn't necessarily, that's pretty extreme. But at the same time, if God spoke to you and said, okay, listen, let's say, for example, you are being very generous, you give a toonie every week when the bucket comes around. If God spoke to you in a dream and said to you, I think you could afford $10 a week, I would like you to give $10 a week towards what the church is doing. Do you sit there and try to make excuses why not to? Or do you do it? There's a lot of less tests that come into our lives. Can you help your neighbor? No, I ain't help my neighbor, no way. That guy's a creep, I don't like him. Okay? Or we get some even creepier stuff. I don't like that person because he's such and such ethnic group. Or I don't like that person because he's such and such a religious group. You know, God doesn't have this list of things you can and can't do or should and should do. He just tells you to do it. Okay, so there's your questions. Enjoy it. We'll do the next part next week. Have a great week and God bless, guys.